something so that you're not hitting it all the time.
Cool.
Okay. So, Andres, nice to have you in.
Oh, listen, it's good to be in. Finally, after all the combos we had, especially about linking up and collabing and having some more, you know what I mean, like actually like filming it and actually kind of diving in a little bit deeper because we have, as you already know, right, long, interesting conversations. So I'm curious to see how this one plays out. But
I'm interested to see how this plays out too. Because the biggest thing is, like, I always go back to, I think you're very influential for a lot of youth. And I don't think it for necessarily the same ways as others do. I think it's because you used your athletics to get great academics. And I think that's sadly something that's kind of gotten lost in the system somehow over the past, 20, 30 years. Is everyone's excited to get a scholarship, but it's to continue their sport. And not that you did not do that. You did that 100%. But you had a second motive, and that was your education. And you actually had a third motive, and that was Infinitus. So, like, you were just, all out, even at a young age, right? So that's really why I wanted to have you in to talk about that. Yeah, so let's kind of start off. How did that kind of path open itself to you? Like, what grade did you really start planning for that? And what grade did you eventually leave in?
the journey, oh my goodness. All right, so now you're going to make me start feeling old. Great way to start. No, I'm playing, but to be honest, like it was always, I guess to start off, like as you said, right, so focusing on like American football, right, and track and field were very much like my first loves. You know what I mean? I feel like as all Canadians, we've definitely played European football or soccer, right, like, you know what I mean, as kids, but then for me, like definitely around 10, because they kind of capped it as the youngest age you could play Pee-wee football here. That was kind of my first hop into, foray into football. Officially, I've been playing unofficially, not on teams outside of that. But, the plan, to be honest, like, had always been to, like, go pro. As is, kind of, I guess, is the common narrative, but, like, very much like that was the commitment, that was the game plan. And so that being the case, the focus was on, going to school, D1 specifically, into the States, for a long time. But it was kind of, getting into, and the parents challenged me as well. When I said, okay, this is the commitment. I'm serious about it. Into junior high, probably grade 7. They're like, if you're serious, you need to really start buckling down, in the schoolroom, whatever the case is. And not to say I wasn't, but I definitely where school was always put first. It was you do well in school or you're not doing anything else from the family. It was kind of a piece of like, okay, well, I will do this and I'll be a little bit more serious because, of course, sometimes it's good to be the class clown, but you have to kind of manage what that's like. And so, yeah, I kind of strapped down into it more so like grade 7, grade 8, like, cool, like this is what I want to do. And then kind of being in that process as well, I was like, okay, well, like if I want to be at this high level, I want to be at the best. I want to play with the best people at the highest level. I probably need to go, about a little differently. Like I can't just pop into the States, be like, cool, like I want to play D1, like university. I need to be there probably in high school early so that I'm with these people, competing with these people and like in the system, and understanding how things work. But also, again, like, everything kind of we talked about, right? You need to compete to get better. And so that means your environment needs to be better, and that means the people that you're with directly in practice and everything else needs to challenge you. You need to be uncomfortable every day. And so I was like, okay, like I gotta really level up and take this seriously. Like, what does that look like for me to go somewhere else? And there had been kind of a couple people kind of through the grapevine that we knew about, like that had gone to school or had done other things, like not like Sacred Heart or whatever, but like out of the province type of deal. And so we were kind of digging into that, and kind of wasn't really in until when I finished up at Goresbrook, and then did 1 year at Citadel. So I played that whole year, which was an interesting season, right? Being a rookie, the norm is you're not, get to play, definitely not starting so much. But that was kind of that first year in terms of, the game plan was, okay, I need to get to the States. So, have to go and double down very much so in terms of like what the training is and what everything else is. So I spent a lot of the junior high years in that headspace, and so...
Yeah, because you would have had to compete at the highest level to get more playing time, to get more visibility, to then record your highlight tapes.
Very much so.
to get that stuff out there, right? So you had to make a big impact in a grade 10 year, which very few athletes do.
Very much so. So it was interesting, right? Because especially like, and it wasn't so much like, oh, I like football, doing like, as I said, like this was the love as well as track. So it was in terms of like competing and training, like that was not a question. Up early, you know what I mean, running home from school in terms of, you know what I mean, just to get the cardio, running at night, training, like it was the process very much so. And so to kind of go into Citadel and you know, get kind of those like second half reps, but still to be able to put up the same numbers as the first team and like less time, it was interesting kind of because it was, you know, you build the kind of the camaraderie, being like the younger and with some of the other guys, but then also being able to get into the games and have an impact at that level, you know what I mean, to you know, when we hit playoffs, like I was able to start, you know, and did well and ended up winning the championship thing, and obviously we had a great team, and shout out to obviously at that point, I mean, O-line, most important people, and those pieces, but like it was a big push that season, and I think in terms of like pressure or whatever, it was definitely an environment where I was like, yo, if I'm serious about this, like, I have to do this. I have to do this, and you know, not talk about doing it, but really just do the work. And at the time, my mom was pregnant with my little brother, so she obviously was supporting and stuff like that. But you know, a family friend really was kind of helping us finesse and have those conversations in terms of like the recruiting. So you know, I had kind of put out, you know, had the highlight tape and done all that stuff. But it ended up kind of being in a position where there's a few schools, you know, on the East Coast that were like, yo, you know, we're interested, like, let's have a conversation. What does you coming here look like? And we started the process a little late because, I mean, as you know, like admissions for private schools and stuff like that, like that's, I mean, they're making decisions and deadlines are like December. And January, you're hearing back, right? You're getting flown in February and all this kind of stuff. And we didn't start until like, I don't even want to say, it might have been like, I don't even, it's been a minute, right? But like cautionary, like October or whatever, like in terms of like those core conversations as to the next step. So everything was definitely more expedited in terms of like, okay, we're doing this more seriously. But had the conversations with, like I said, yeah, multiple schools, and it was kind of like figuring out what does this fit. Like I'm actually going to go away and you know, go play and attend school in another country, in another space with like a whole different system.
How many offers did you end up getting in the end?
Yeah, so like for the prep schools.
For the prep schools, yeah.
So I think it was like we're talking to like 4. I mean, we reached out to kind of connect with, but I think it was ended up talking probably with like 4 or 5 coaches.
And what schools do you remember?
On the low, I mean, obviously the main one, Exeter, Phillips Exeter, which was kind of the decision. But I think, you know, we talked to Cushing, just like someone was in the region. And it was a minute ago, so to be honest, all of them I can't kind of remember, but it was definitely some schools like in like the Connecticut area. You know,
the reason I ask is what took you to Exeter? What was the final decision that kind of made that the school of choice?
No, for sure. I mean, a whole bunch, right? Of kind of pieces coming together for that. But I mean, really the staple where I said academics were the first and foremost thing that were, I don't want to say harped on, but like driven home, you know, as a foundation. Like you need to do well in terms of like education, not just institutional, but like education is paramount. So finding out once we had that conversation with the coach, like, okay, well, you know, finding out the status and the prestige of the school, and to find out, okay, well, y'all are historically a Harvard feeder, and the rival, you know, Andover, who of course we're better than, you know, is like the Yale feeder, and kind of exploring that, letting that sink in, and be like, okay, what, you know, but then looking at, okay, well, you have among the longest standing rivalries, and you have, you know, $1 billion with the B endowment. And it's a space where you have about 1,200 kids, grade 9 to grade 12 with like a post-grad year, but all in a space where like they live, and this is like a university campus, and it's international, and it's focused on like experiential learning, and it's all discussion based. Like a big class is 10, you know, 11, maybe, I wouldn't even say 12 students. Like big class is like 11 or 12 students. right? So the whole dynamic is different because you're sitting around an oval table and you're having conversations. The teachers are facilitators, so they facilitate discussion and kind of shepherd the class or kind of guide us along. And so like that was very different, right? I'm a visual learner and those kind of things. So I'm like, oh, well, you're saying a whole lot of things that make sense. I like it. Obviously, the football situation was very positive feedback. Like there was a spot, their running back who they had brought in as a post grad. So kind of like, for Ontario reference, it'd be like the grade 13. I just left. So, I was in a spot where I definitely was going to be able to have years there. But it really was like the academic piece that made it stand alone more than anything else, because the other schools were had solid programs and kind of had good academics and stuff like that, very much so, or great academics, not throwing shade by any means, but the degree and the distinction of kind of the environment and the culture there spoke for itself.
Well, they fight for the top 3 prep schools in the States every year, no matter what. Like, whether they're 1, 2, or 3, like, there's, you know what I mean? Like, that is such a prestigious situation. They have to be doing something right. You know what I mean? And I just remember one of the conversations when we first met that you had was you said you walked into a math class and all of the answers were there and the question was there, but how you got to it was a whole bunch of different equations on the board that people could go see and figure out what one works for you. Mm-hmm. And that's such a different way of learning. Like, that's a way that we have to get to more and more. But, like, people don't do that, right? People are always looking for the answer. That's such a weird way to be like, no, the answer's here. How do you get to it? Like, it's just a different way, right?
Very much so. And just because you mentioned the math part, right? That in and of itself was an adjustment because, going into a space where it's like not just a different country or whatever, but their whole focus, the pedagogy, like the belief system, right, was very much so on changing or kind of shifting what the narrative of the space was, in the sense of they're making sure that everybody in the room is not just in the room, they have a voice, and you're put in positions where your lived experience is valued, should you take the chance to speak up, because you do have that opportunity. Kind of the onus is on the student, and I lost some points because I went from kind of being the class clown and I held it down academically and stuff to like really paying attention to what's going on in the room and like listening to who feels the need to speak. And math was an interesting space where I enjoy numbers and definitely like money and kind of the financial spaces, but I was put in a space where all of a sudden it's geometry focused, which was not my strong suit, and kind of in a space where people had more background because their education system was stronger. Coming from other private schools or coming from even some of the city schools, they're learning differently than we are here, right? And so all those things were kind of compounding. But then to be in different spaces where, okay, even my friends are in these classrooms and they have different experiences, but, we're getting the same questions and the work ended up, finding out later on it was higher level stuff, sure. But, because of all the experience in the room and people's learning styles and, where they're coming from, they're actually addressing the problems differently. So we all get the same problem, but, whether people are breaking out in groups to solve this, once we bring it back to the class, as you mentioned, right, it's getting everybody else to kind of say, okay, well, cool, you guys have this problem, show us how you did it. Okay, did other people come up with that a different way? Okay, well, can you show us what that looked like? And kind of going through that again, like it's experience, it's an experience, right? And it's not just kind of, again, there was, it didn't make me a genius in the classroom by any means in terms of that class, but it was different because you're changing the whole attitude and the framework for students to be able to see, like, as you said, it's not just, cool, there's one answer that we got to get to, there's one ideal. If you're looking at it this way or any other way, besides this way, you're wrong. Like, you're celebrating the diversity of thought. You're stoking curiosity and creativity. Like, you're in a classroom in one space, and it's not applied just specifically to the maths, right? But it's challenging all kinds of different pieces. And so, like, to be in those environments is unique and is very much so, a part of why, we have these conversations, because it's impacted me in a lot of ways.
Well, and like you look at, like, one of my favorite classes in university, not high school, right? Like, so this is, because I didn't have that type of choice in high school. It was like, there's a parrot at the front of the room or whatever, like, and then I'm just supposed to bark back as another parrot what they say, like, You know what I mean? But in university, one of my favorite courses was called Perspectives of Death and Dying. And the only reason why I thought it was an interesting course was every single week he would give you a question. It was always a tough question. Mm-hmm. And he'd ask you to state a point. For or against, make your list. And then it was always a debate class. You'd have everybody in the room and they'd have to talk. And, you know, when you're starting to say, like, should old people have, you know, old age pensions and things like this where that's, like, paid for, that's helped out. And all of a sudden, like, people are like, no, I think that money should be spent somewhere else. Well, that's a point. You have to listen to it. It may be not valid to you, but you have to keep your mind open. So I can only imagine at a younger age in high school to start having those perspectives where you're thoughtfully and politely listening to someone else and hearing their points of view. That's probably helped to even get into things like Infinitus because you're seeing other people's points. Like, to me, that's really what your company is about, is seeing perspective. It might not always be right, but it's the perspective that's important. And I feel like that's what you kind of just learn through Exeter. It's like hard work, dedication, surround yourself with people that are hardworking, and then, yeah.
Oh, very much so. And that's why it was like such a unique experience. Because like being there at a space where it's like, okay, well, all of a sudden it's, you know, it's not just kids from like Dartmouth or kids in Halifax or like the Square, or like whatever, you know. It's kids in China. Kids from, you know, 10 different countries from Africa, right? All over the Middle East, you know, Central America, South America, and then of course, you know, across North America. And so it's just like, okay, well, the conversations are different. You know, not only, you know, is it a conversation of looking at like, what is your belief on this? And like, why is it like, you're having to hear about like, you know, the reason, like the actual rooted reasons of like, where they're coming from. Because you're like really, I mean, the conversation's just being kind of held in the classroom, right? And you are consuming the curriculum and kind of going through the stuff, but it's you're being challenged consistently at a different level. We're not being challenged on the text, we're being challenged to be critical, right? And being challenged to make a point and understand you have to defend it. And whether that means sitting there and just listening to what everyone else has to say about what you said, or, you know what I mean, re-articulating how you speak because, you know, how you're talking to someone is not meeting them where they're at. Understanding you have to speak to the audience. You know what I mean? And so, for me, it was very much so a space where Exeter didn't give me new thoughts, per se. It really refined a lot of the things that I you know, had, and, you know, as grounded beliefs and as core beliefs, because it put me in a space where, you know, you're able to be curious about these things. You're able to kind of test and try, you know, some of these things you're passionate about or you've heard about. I mean, speaking specifically to like being able to go into like a camera class and media class like my senior year, right? I mean, like that whole space was so different because I ended up in a school where D1 was the game plan. So literally every course that I needed to take was scripted for me for my first 2 years because, you know, initially the schools in the recruiting process thought I was going to be a postgrad, which was, you know, and they were still interested, but I'm like, no, I have 3 years. Right, and I'm coming here with that in mind. However, because I'm going into the States and because I'm doing the thing, like, you know, you're an incoming person, you need to take U.S. history. So then what years am I able to do that at Exeter? Right, and so like literally my grade 10, my grade 11 years were scripted. I had all the hard classes, I had like everything. So that way it opened up in my senior year, but like the clock started as soon as I went down there because I needed to be in a position where, you know, you have all these credits and these courses to be able to go D1 and have these conversations with coaches. So that was like even a learning curve, you know, in and of itself. But then, you know, to kind of end up going down there and, you know, being in spaces where, you know, senior year, I'm like, cool, I get to be in this media class, learn some about, you know, editing and film and video, like, you know, and photography. You know, starting to kind of be more curious about, you know, I had a speech making class. I didn't even do well in the speech making class because the teacher, you know, said I need to not go off the cuff so much and kind of recite a little bit more, which I laugh about because there is some truth to that, but it was kind of like, you know, the experience of like being in different environments, right? And for me, even looking back at it, that was a huge opportunity because like we went through like all the different spaces. You know, we're in a classroom, we have to learn how to speak in front and around of a podium. We have to learn how to speak doing a presentation like with a PowerPoint. We have to learn how to speak, like our stage was real big. I'm kind of underscoring it a little bit, like there, underselling it, whatever. But like, you where assemblies, it's assembly hall, like we had to go up and learn how to give a speech on a stage. How do you hold a space? How do you exploring those kind of pieces. And you're getting put in these things where, whether it's uncomfortable or it's just different, right? And you have to learn, you have to grow because you're doing something different. And that's kind of the key and the big, really takeaway. Like, Exeter's kind of, their motto is non-city, which means not for oneself, right? And it's huge because they have a lot of, focus and emphasis on like that, like community and kind of impact. They have a whole day with the school, and whether it's, you go by your team or, you go by your dorm or whatever, but you go out and there's like community engagement stuff. So like the football team would always go and do like the grounds work for like a park and a playground, all that kind of stuff. So like there's that big commitment, but like the other end of that is like there is a high duty of care. Like I was able to go into an environment where, there's the whole range of people from, lowest socioeconomic level to like people who are multi-billionaires. Their families like are set, you know what I mean, in terms of like multinational companies that I have been running for hundreds of years consistently with high-level partnerships with people that own shipping yards or have private planes or, attend floor-side seats to home games with teams to cheer against them, right? Like very different dynamic and environment. And it's like, okay, cool, well, their emphasis the whole time was this is the best place, this is the best network you're going to ever have access to. Being in this environment, being able in a space where you get your mindset and attitude challenged. It's a big focus on like that growth. And so it's like in that still there is a high duty of care, right? You know better, so you have to do better. Right? So in some of the things you're talking about like that's a big part of kind of with the Infinitus or in terms of like even my process of like being at Exeter. Right, I'm like, cool. I'm very grateful for all these opportunities, and I've overcome hurdles and all that kind of stuff very much. So it's like at the same point at each of these levels. So going up and playing for the national team, Team Canada under 19, where we won gold in Texas. Shout out to that team. It was an amazing experience. But we beat Team USA, and it's like the whole time still. I have all kinds of friends that were at an elite level or at a high level, or even leaving that team, and people like. Where's the academic piece? You know what I mean? Like you're performing at a high athletic level, but if you don't have the support financially, if you don't have the support at home or academically, like you end up missing some of these opportunities. So you can't act like you peak early because you don't have these supports that are needed. And a lot of the time you're not aware of what's needed. So for me, it was like, man, I really began to feel the pressure. And until I kind of have a different word for it, I'll leave it with that. But like the pressure of like in the reality of like there are people that are slipping through the cracks at all the levels, and it starts with youth, youth in each other, or youth in their communities, or youth in industry. Like there's these disconnects, and for me, I was like, all right, well, listen, it's not just a theoretical thing; it hits close to home. But like, what's going on? You know what I mean? And so like, instead of just okay, well, how do we get all these kids to prep schools? How do we change what's going on, and in a tangible way? And so that's for me like where the Infinitus stuff started, because even doing the playing football and competing down there.
So before we go into that, because I do want to do that. You really just started talking about it there really well. It's prep school isn't for everyone, but academics is. Yeah. And so if you go to Acadia and you had high honors your whole schooling, or at least honors, and then you're a good athlete, you can still almost get a full scholarship.
Absolutely.
So yes, half of it's academic, half it's athletic. That's fine. If you go to Holland College, community college, and you want to work really hard, you can still get great scholarships there. Mm-hmm. If you want to go D1 or D2, you can get great scholarships there. What I'm trying to say is there's so many different options for everyone. But through the years, and you've seen it, people always keep pushing more for the athletic side than the academic side. And that's the thing that you're really noticing too, right? Is that's why you put yourself in that environment of everybody now thinks kind of like me to push and motivate.
Very much so.
And that's the thing that I see all the time. And what I'm trying to do is kids need exposure, but at the same time, some kids can't go to certain places because of the skills that they have or the lack of skills that they have. And that's not meant in a bad way or a good way. It's this is more your path and why. But it's like to make an informed decision.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the big piece, right? I mean, like in a couple pieces or couple points that you made were very big and relevant and timely, and whatever other buzzwords we can throw in there. But yeah, like I'm cautioning in terms of the academics. Education is for everyone.
I agree.
Education is education.
And lifelong learning. You can always
lifelong learning is the most important thing. Like my biggest frustration, especially with the public school system or general traditional institutions, is that like we really focus on like the theory, not the action, not the result so much, but like the theory. And so kind of, in that education piece, it's like, education doesn't mean institutional learning. It doesn't mean school learning. Education talks about like life smarts, lived experience, and like actually valuing the bigger picture. Because if, you walk in and, okay, well, I went to university with this, that tells me like, part of your story, but it doesn't tell me anything about your passion. It doesn't tell me about any of the wider things, right? When CEOs and when anybody at higher levels look at stuff, they don't care about where you went to school. That's checking on the box. And it shows, it's our traditional measure of showing that you were able to cross this threshold to say, I've done this body of work. The focus very much on now is on portfolio. And that means personal and professional development. That means continued growth. Because if you're working at the bank, everyone else can work at the bank too. But what have you done and what have you leveraged in terms of your time and your opportunities at the bank? And so it's like, here, where you're speaking about, like, it doesn't matter for the most, depending on what you want, but like where you go to school doesn't matter in the sense it's like you need to still go to school and get what you can out of that experience, because the system, culturally, socially, economically, everything has shifted already and is continuing to shift. And so it's about how can you stay and be active, right? So like we can't just tell kids like, you need to go to school. And like you'll end up getting good money. Like school wasn't, designed for people to go out and be necessarily bosses, CEOs. Like the highest earning people in schools, like A students aren't, for the most part, and these are other fact checks, so people can check that out for sure. But like they're not people leading countries. A students, A++ students are not the people leading Fortune 500 companies. They're not.
It's usually the ADHD.
Right? It's the kids that were put to the side that talk too much or that aren't paying attention or that aren't valued or they're getting higher marks in the arts, and not in the English, or they have dyslexia and they had to overcome these hurdles because they're somewhere else or they're not right. So they focus on personally learning and developing and growing themselves and going about it in a non-traditional way that put them up to actually build their skills and their portfolio. And so, like, that's the big piece is, like, there's so many opportunities. I mean, like, Nova Scotia, and you look at the States, there's like 1 million schools in the States. You could just literally drive down the block and see 4 different schools. You know what I mean? And so that's where it's important, because where the narrative is shifting, like, schools are traditionally, they're just the gatekeepers of knowledge, right? And so if I go to St. Mary's or Dalhousie or whatever, I'm buying into that network, right? And so when you distill it, let's look at the branding, right? You're buying access to a network, hopefully it's someone that's going to enable you to getting employment, and the other piece is that you're getting certification for completing something academic. And so that being the case, that you're getting access to network and certification, you have to figure out what is important to each of these people. Do I want network? Network is the most important thing, period. So that has to be a high priority for everybody. What is the school's network-wise? What is that going to give me? What's it going to give me access to? Or what barriers is this going to reduce to give me more, access to? And then the other piece is like the academic piece. So if you want to be, if you want to study and go into kind of a continuing, piece of education where you're doing a master's or, you're going into focus on like a doctor degree or some other medical side, like, yeah, you definitely have to do that. But then again, you're figuring out, what is this academic piece? What kind of kickback do I need? Instead of just going, because a lot of people and the narrative for so long, and especially in Nova Scotia, has been like, you go to school and you get a job and you'll get a career and you'll be good. And I'll be good because I have support and that's what my parents did or my brother or whatever. But like the reality is that going to university to get guaranteed a job, that happened for our grandparents. That has shifted. People go to university now, like we're at a state as a country, right, as a nation. And I don't think we're a first world country. I'd say we're 1.5 or second world. We've always kind of been more on the coattails or on the cusp and at the forefront. But university is the new high school. And education is the expectation once a nation gets to this piece. And so that being the reality, people have to understand that me going in and getting this doesn't make me any better than somebody else. Doesn't mean that I have more value to offer somebody else. Just because I got an arts degree and I'm super interested in this business, that doesn't mean that somebody that has a business degree but with no understanding of how to apply it doesn't mean they're going to be better than you. It's more about understanding like how to leverage and like what these institutions or what these jobs or what these things can give you access to from a leverageable piece, like tangible to us, right? And so like with what you're doing with youth, it's making sure, as you said, like maybe it's Holland College, maybe it is St. Mary's, maybe it is trying to go to Exeter, you know, maybe it's not, maybe it's going to Willis, Northampton, or Deerfield. Shout out to them because they, you know what I mean, got a good long standing too, right? But everybody's journey is different and everybody has a different skills and passions, right? But their life journey is specific to them. And so it really does come down to understanding what your needs are and how the environment can meet those.
So on that, and you've been like talking about it quite a bit, but like just really fine tuning it. Well, the biggest issue that I've always come down to, which is the end result, and that's because I am a lifelong learner. I'm a teacher, however, I run a video editing company.
Which is teaching.
Yeah, and the reason why I did this is because I wanted to learn how to do something new, right? And it is the lifelong learner thing. And I like to listen to feedback, that whole feedback loop, right? Like, makes you better and better. But it's any single kid who is an athlete, let's just say they make the NHL, the NBA, the NFL. Mm-hmm. How many years do they do that? Well, we found out that the average is 2 for a lot of those sports. 2. So you might make like 1.2 mil. Like maybe, right? So what are you doing after that? And if you think about it, if you do make 2, like you're about 21, 22 years old. So now you're 24, 25 years old. You hopefully live till 75, 100. What are you doing for those 50 years, man? And that's what I feel like a lot of people aren't realizing. Like their goal, okay, I'm going to get to the NBA. Oh, great, but then what are you going to do at 31? What are you going to do at 32? And the things, even when you were in the NBA, you could have a clothing line. You could have a podcast. You can, do all these things, the networking side, so that you have brands at the end of it. Whether you are, off the bench player or you're at the star of the league, it doesn't matter because you still should be having those extra things. And that's what I always go back to is you ended up getting your high school degree and then you got your university degree. And then now you've got this company. That was your choice. But if you didn't do that, where else would you be? You'd have to have a job somewhere. You need that education to get you further, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess kind of please keep digging, right? I think like that's kind of the interesting piece, right? And for me, like Infinitus very much so has been that, right? So like, I've been doing this work for 8 years, right? Visibly, it's a lot less than that, right? It's been a registered business for 4 years. And, that being the case, 8 years, that puts me at Exeter, right? So I'm in Exeter. And for me, like, as we talked about, like, I believe everything happens for a reason. And so especially with, like tearing my ACL on the very first play of the state championship game, that being my only fear, right? I really had to ground myself in, like, what is this next step and what's that experience going to be like? And how does that look? Me being in isolation in an infirmary on campus, on crutches, not being able to be in my dorm room because I can't crutch up the spiral staircase. It's like, what is me not letting my circumstances limit me? What does that look like? And so, like, digging deeper to the reality, like, not everyone has access, right? Like, point blank period, the distinction, or for me, the difference between people that are successful and however you want to coin success, right? Because success depends on who the person is, right? Everything else is kind of through that filter. Success, so the difference between success and those who are not successful, is the foundation that you start with, which, as everyone knows, it's not universal, right? Everyone starts at a different piece. So then the key is that next element, the level of support you get as you go through whatever these transitional periods are along the journey, right? It's constant growth. It's the growth mindset or continual learning. So it's like as every day is different, as every hour is a little different because technology and everything else is happening, like how am I getting a little bit better? And so it's kind of like taking a step back and starting to kind of challenge yourself even more so because I hate school. I hated institutional education. Like it felt like a burden. It was very much so weight on me the whole time. I was ready to Like I finished at St. Mary's, at the Sobey School of Business, like 2 months ago. That, and I was did a year at Simon Fraser before that. Like that period of time, that was extra time for me to build the foundation of Infinitus, and that was my focus. Obviously, I was playing football, and still there was a piece of like, do I want to go pro again? As that kind of value had shifted, and then I stepped away, but it really was kind of a piece of like what am I going to get out of this? Like, what do I need out of this? Like, I had everything at Exeter. I went to Exeter, learned so much, got exposure to all those things, and at that point, like, even at grade 10 at Exeter, I was just like, yeah, I want to graduate. I'm done with this. Right? Knowing that I still have to get there and go through the rest of the process, but I didn't enjoy it in terms of having to do, having class in at school 6 days a week, Saturday classes, going from 8 in the morning till in the night because it's full day stuff, shirt and tie, it's very different. I enjoy the shirt and tie, and I love the fashion stuff, you know what I mean? But it's a very different dynamic, and so you have to be intentional as to what you're getting. You can't just kind of go through the motions. So I got a lot of that exit, and I was intentional a lot, and a lot more has come in reflection and in hindsight and kind of like processing the experience. But like the reality is that like you can go to any of these schools, you can do whatever, like going to Sobey School of Business. Like just to go to these schools doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. Like it's what you do in these spaces. It's who you meet in these spaces, not professors, because for the most part they're not going to employ you, right? It's the youth you meet. It's the people in the master's programs you meet. I mean, through the conversations that I've had, both on camera, off camera, in meetings with CEOs, in meetings with like other people in general. Like the richness comes outside of the structure, whether it's institutionally academics, so it's outside of the classroom. The richness comes in the hallways. It comes in the dorms. Your memories, your a lot of the growing didn't happen in those rooms. In the dynamic of like you're the boss, you're the teacher, and I'm coming in to get checked on my knowledge of the value of that. No, a lot of the growing comes outside of those things. So you have to understand that the narrative it's not changing. It's shifted completely. We're in a different space, and so like you could go to SMU. And you could come from a rural environment, and you could come from an inner city place, and you could have limited supports, and your foundation is not the same as anybody else. But because you have the internet, you can start to explore what you like to do and figure out how you can start to make money. Like for myself, because I was all in football from the age of 10, like I couldn't even tell you how many hours I put in over 12 years. That period was of high commitment, playing for East West in an all-star game after coming back from knee surgery early the second time. Like continually sacrificing things, continually making sure that you're in a spot, and the self-care piece. And so it's like people have to be intentional about what you're doing and what you're going through, right? So whether it's like the football or any of the professional stuff, it's like 2 to 3 years. What does the rest of that look like? Even going to university. Okay, you want to play sports at university and you don't even want to go pro, but like university is 2, 3, 4 years. If you're a starter, if you're a stud or whatever, like cool, you might get that full time. Otherwise, you might get a year and a half. So what are you doing in that space other than just showing up? It consumes a lot of time to be an athlete. It consumes way more time to be a high-level athlete. And to be an elite-level athlete, it's way more time. So it's like when you're exchanging your time, it's great to get that feel-good. It's great to have, get touchdowns and get celebrations and go to parties and do whatever. It's great. But it's like at the same point, you're sacrificing so much of this to be awesome at this and to really, make sure you're good and comfortable and confident. There are other things that are losing your energy and are losing your time and your attention. And so when you put your focus on those other things, you have to be that much more intentional about it. Because like we as athletes, anyone in any sport, like it's a trade-off.
So when you say intentional, like I get what you mean intentional, and I like it, but can you explain what you really mean with intentional? Because like when I hear it, it's like, yes, I'm being told to be on the field. Yes, I'm being told to have a 1,000-word essay, but those things are, and I might not want to do them, but in the grand scheme of things, that's where I'm going to get to, and it's because I'm being asked to do these things. And it's like, well, I have to do a 1,500-word essay. Well, I actually kind of want to learn about this, and I think I might do it when I'm older, so I'm going to actually write about it and read about it. Like, is that what you're kind of talking about intentional? Like, you're still trying to always be mindful and thinking about what's your end goal? Is that what you mean when you're being intentional?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of
like where am I now?
very much
where
like
do I need to be?
just like intentional in terms of being mindful, being aware. Like first and foremost, like it's being aware. Like most people in any capacities just kind of go through the motions at some point, whatever it is, on autopilot, even if it's like because we need breaks. And so the challenge is that when you're even in these spaces where you're like, cool, I love football, I love basketball, whatever, I'm in training mode, you still get caught up in going through the motions. All right, I'm going to the gym. All right, I'm going to practice. All right, I'm doing this. And so you can still be bringing your all, but like, what is the, as you're saying, like, it's being able to just take a step back and be aware of like, what is going on right now in this moment, but like also, why am I doing this? Like, what is my North Star? Right, and so for me, like, it really, everything just comes back to like that North Star piece. So yeah, I could go to school, and yeah, I could go to St. Mary's or NSCC or literally like wherever the people are, I guess in that space, but it's like, it's understanding the value, right? And so people just go to school because traditionally that's what you do. And so if you're not aware of like, listen, well, I don't enjoy the English because I didn't get that support. So for me, even though I love poetry and love the creative side, I hate going to English class. Because yeah, I can keep up with the reading, but like my grammar has always been whatever because I didn't have that support. Or any of these lines, like, you end up in math class and then a lot of people are like, man, like, even doing the work that we do, like, that's the easy one. Who doesn't like math? Who doesn't feel comfortable or confident in math class? Bunch of kids. I was definitely one of those kids, right? I love numbers, but there's a reason why there's certain things, that you don't feel confident in or comfortable in. And so it's like really like exploring like that. So in terms of being intentional, like don't just show up into a space and do. Like, why are you there? Why are they bringing you here? Like, what is the big picture, right? And I think that's something that, at all levels, like that's the reality. Like you need to take a step back. And if you don't travel, and if you haven't been outside of Nova Scotia or whatever province or city or wherever you are, like if you don't get outside of that routine, right, it's a very dangerous place to be in because you need to have an awareness. It's like the world is so much bigger. The world is so much bigger than what's going on across the street with your neighbor, on your block, or in your city even.
If you're not careful, that overwhelms you, right? Mm-hmm. You almost feel like this is the only place I'm going to be in. You hear about it in a lot of the public housing places, like working in Spryfield and stuff, they'll make it their goal to leave and to get out of there, but they haven't actually saved enough money or got the right job or got a car to get to where they need to be. They end up right back there, but they might have lost their housing. And that, but it's always just centered around, like, mm-hmm. This is my one target, when there's so much more to your life that there could be if you're able to get outside of it.
Right, and that's the challenge, because then the conversation be, okay, well, as we said, that's part of that foundational conversation. Some people are afforded that privilege, or really it's the privilege and the ability to move and maneuver, or say I got to move, or say I got to pick up this new job, or like, if you can't afford a car, then you got to take the bus, and that means you have to build in extra time for the bus, and that's part of like the hustle or the grind or whatever. Part of being single moms, they go way harder. They have to. It's pressure, right? But it's also, it's a reality. And so, like in these spaces, it's interesting because the duty of care can't just be on everybody in these. Just using the buzzword, like a public housing or a rural community or a new immigrant or someone who's a language minority. Like, it's not all on them to figure it out because you were put in a situation that you didn't have the skills and the tools that someone else was born into having these conversations, right? I mean, like, that's a reality, right? You can be born into an environment where you can bust your ass every day and still the moves and the decisions you're making are not ones that are getting you forward, right? That's a big challenge of being in survival mode, where other people are born in thrive mode and they can bumble and stumble and fall down all kinds, but they're still somehow progressing forward because their environment is making sure that they do that. They still have been conditioned to make the decisions or put themselves into places or have access to that network. And so it is very interesting because, like, in this tech age or in the digital age, like, you got to go to school to complete stuff. Not everybody has to go to university or college or whatever the case is, but in terms of still at this space, you have to understand that if you're not going to school, your body of work better speak for itself more so than anybody else's. So myself, as an example, I still went to school, but right now I have 2 registered businesses, and I was running this other company for 4 years. So the whole time I was at St. Mary's, I had a registered business, had a company.
And you're taking business.
And I'm still taking business. I finished with a double major in entrepreneurship and marketing because it made the most sense for me to be able to take the stuff that I felt was relevant, while at the same time also playing varsity football. You know, there was not a lot of time, right? My time was very much so limited, and it wasn't kicking with all kinds of friends. It wasn't running around, not going to parties. Like for me, again, it has to be perspective for everybody. You have to figure out like where you are. Be real, right? You have to be real, and you can't just say, "Well, I want to be successful, and that means tomorrow I'm going to go and get this money or whatever." Like every day is a day, and there's an opportunity every second, right? So it's kind of changing the mindset and that attitude to being like, cool, how can we get these kids in these spaces? So if I'm a youth and I'm interested in playing better at ball, like, yeah, it's practicing these other things, but maybe it's also asking more questions to university people that have already been there, right? And starting to reach out and overcome some of these things, because not everybody that you come up with or not everybody in your household has all the answers just because they're around you. That's who you have access to. You got to use the internet. You got to ask more questions. You got to like explore these things, because school doesn't define you, right? The role, like work, it doesn't define people, right? Like what they do defines them. Their body of work inherently defines them. So like if you really care about something, you're not the best, you put in a lot of hours, shit, people notice. Why? Your body of work defines you. You don't even have to speak on it. You got better. People can see it. You want to be better at photography. You don't have money. You didn't have access. Even when like we started this stuff, we were borrowing equipment, paying people whatever, right? Or trying to rent stuff. You have to do it, and you just keep doing it and keep doing it. Like it doesn't have to be A1 in quality, but you're practicing, you're finessing your body of work, and so eventually, whether it's free or not, your body of work grows, right? And for me, like that's really what it comes down to, is like it's portfolio mindset. You don't have to be like all in. I'm an entrepreneur. Like I'm quitting my job. Like I need to make it. Like nah. Like if you have a family, if you have some kind of situation, so that you still have to pay attention to like your foundational core needs, and gotta make sure that's taken care of.
Yeah, like I'm always gonna be a teacher. I'm never not going to be a teacher, no matter how successful things like this are. Like I'm just going to divvy that off to other people. You know what I mean? Because I always want to be a teacher, but I also want my core. You know what I mean? Like my core salary, I guess. Like my dependency, my consistency, or whatever you want to say. But I also look at like one of my friends. He doesn't have a marketing degree or a PR degree, but what he does best is marketing and PR. And he just has an arts degree, and I hate using that word just because it sounds like. But it's his knowledge and his understanding is all marketing and PR. And he can do it better than anyone I've met who does that type of stuff. But now we've switched our mindset and in conversations of, okay, let's not talk to people about the fact that you don't have the degree. Let's create the portfolio that doesn't even have them asking whether you have the degree. Mm-hmm. Because if you've got the portfolio to show that you know what you're doing, how does it matter whether you have the degree or not? And that goes with that lifelong learning part, right? Like if you're a lifelong learner and you're continually trying to get better, and like, so where I'm going with this is when one of the athletes came to our school, they were from Spryfield. They went to our school. They're now at grammar school, prep school here that's very highly regarded. They said the toughest thing for them was that kids who they thought were their friends, slowly but surely didn't. And kids who they thought that were their friends for certain reasons, once they said like, ooh, that's not a good choice for me or whatever, they just disappeared altogether. And that was something that you kind of had to get used to. Not in a bad way, in a good way. Like, you are not meant for everybody, and not everybody's meant for you. And you would not believe the amount of people that are holding you back without you realizing it. And so you have to be true to yourself to be asking that along your path. Do these people matter as much around me, and what am I getting out of them?
Right, and that comes, for me, like that comes back to the intentional piece, right? Like, so intentional, and like a big thing for myself, we've talked about that recently as well, like is like intentional with that, like everyone has the same amount of time in a day, you know what I mean? And so it's like, it's not I don't have enough time for this, like you have a lot going on, so how do you be more intentional with your energy, right? How do you leverage your time into what you're doing, like how do you be more aware? And so whether it's, putting yourself in a space to see, okay, well, I got to change things up. And all of a sudden my crew doesn't vibe with me the same way. Like, okay, well, pay attention to that, and what does that actually mean? So in the big picture, it's not like, oh, I don't value them or whatever, but you got to actually dig. So like, again, what is my North Star? A if I'm out here trying to put my mom's in a house, right? I want to get her out of the situation that we're in, and I want to make sure there's food. Cool. So that means if I still want to kick with them, I have to figure out what that means as a priority. I don't have to kick them off and say like, nah, we're done, right? You have to start figuring out like where are the ceilings in each of these relationships, in each of these experiences, and like it'll change depending on who it is and depending on what's going on. But as you start to explore and kind of figure that stuff out, like that stuff plays out. Like you understand it and are able to see the ceilings to like the different experiences. And like, maybe you don't need to spend 5 days a week with the crew, right? Maybe you need to, because what you're getting out of it is you're getting validation, or you're getting to relax, you're getting to go somewhere not feeling judged. If that's what you're looking for, cool. How do you do that in a space that still feels safe for you, where you can now continue to build yourself in these other areas and that's still there? No different than you want to make sure you got the mainstay as a teacher, but you're still building yourself personally, professionally, and growing in all these other places. But you're exploring like what does that look like for you, so that it's positive overlap and it's not becoming work and it's not becoming tiresome or and that's no different than any relationship. If you're not intentional about like what is the vibe I'm getting, if every time I show up and see this person I'm tired as hell when I leave, like what's that? Or they make me feel negative, or they tell me that like every time I leave with a good idea, they charge me up and I feel happy, or whatever the case. Like, we're aware of how we feel around people. We just don't process per se, right? You know when you get tired, when like you get excited or whatever, or when you don't have time for things, the energy for things, right? And so it's like, putting people in the driver's seat, like that's kind of what it comes back to. Like you gotta be intentional, right? And it's difficult, but like it is having hard conversations, and it is being reflective. Like for me, that was the whole thing of like you gotta miss a lot. If you want to be in school, like you can do the academics or the fun, have friends and stuff like that. Or you can do the school, but you can't do all those things all the time. The same value. And so like it was like you can go into the club, or don't show up to the club till you own it, and then it's a different conversation. But like why are you like you want to have fun, cool, but attach the value to that. You want to spend time. How much time are you going to go there? You're going to spend money. How much of your money are you going to spend there? And what is the repeat? You're funding somebody else. You're paying for somebody else to go and personally grow and develop. Well, they're not there, right? You're in the space. And so it's like, what can you do to kind of, it's a cheat code. You know what I mean? Like it's a big game, basically, right? And it's starting to figure out like how you can leverage yourself, because everybody has talent. Everybody has knowledge. Everyone has insight. But I'm starting to figure out like, how do I start making that work for me?
So the reason why I kind of want to do that is you can be as intentional as you want, and there is fate in some way, shape, or form, and I agree with you on all of that. You're definitely not wrong. Like, there's just a reason for so many things. But life throws you curveballs.
Of course.
And, you thought you had a path to the NFL, and it looked like you did, right? And then all of a sudden you got a big injury in a big game. How does that change? Because the things you were intentional about all of a sudden get sidetracked. And the problem with when you are this intentional is you have goals and timelines in mind, and all of a sudden life says, fuck that.
Oh, yeah.
And it kind of just leaves you there, and it makes you sit by yourself for most of it and rethink everything. So with that intentional, like, let's kind of just talk about that point in time in your life. Like, how did you move past some of that stuff? How did you just survive? How did you figure that out? Because your path, even though you had all those intentional things throughout and what you thought you knew you wanted to do, there was some big curveballs that went in your way at a pretty pivotal age, right? You would have been, what, 19, 18?
Yeah, 18 going on 19.
Right? So, yeah.
Diving into it, cool. Yeah, I mean, so basically the context, I was coming off, playing on Team Canada, doing well, the year before. I mean, at Exeter, everything was like really on the up and up. You know what I mean? Done well with track. Both of those things were going on. Heading into the senior season, where, of course, got to win state, got to win the rivalry, and wanted to compete, and really do well like in track, and had, as you said, like really set some milestones. Like, yeah, this is what we're gonna do, and being on pace to that, throughout the season, talking to coaches and recruits and whatever. And like, yeah, very first play of the state championship game, turned my ACL. Like, it's my only fear, period, only fear, and it happened in the first play, and like, life was full stop. I went from being the fastest person on the field, period, to, I couldn't keep up with the doctor walking in the hallway to go get my knee checked out after being on the sideline. Like, very big change of pace, very, very much so a shift, like being in my headspace, right? And as I said, like, I've always believed that everything happens for a reason. And very specifically, like when I was in grade, it was probably before grade 9, but, being at Goresbrook up here, I made a point of like, I'm living with no regrets. I will have no regrets, right? I'd watched enough stuff and being raised by single moms, at a young age, like, I was exposed to like some of the older crowd, right? And so like I heard about what it's like, on the back end to have a bunch of stuff you want to do and you didn't do it. You didn't make time for it. Or, you didn't do this opportunity or whatever. I wish I was nicer to this person, right? And it's just like all that stuff. And like, so I'm like, nah, I'm going to have no regrets. I'm going to live with no regrets and be, in it, just kind of experience. And so for me, when I tore my ACL, I was like, yo, like, this is a very humbling moment because, like, I said this shit. You know what I mean? So I kind of have to eat it right now. I can't say stuff happens for a reason when it's going well. And not also believe that, there's going to be even more work that has to happen when stuff doesn't go well. And so, yeah, it was a big pivot. It was a big shift. Lost some of the offers, the main ones that I was focusing on. And it was a big, like, okay, well, I got to rehab, got to get all this stuff in. I'll probably end up redshirting, which I was fine with for the first year to make sure I'm good to go. But it was like so many moving parts. And it was, literally, as I said, like, it was, a stretch where I got the surgery and I was in isolation, like, literally in an infirmary bed, like, had a laptop and stuff, and I was there for like a week. Didn't really, I crushed the class like maybe 1 or 2 times, but like on a bunch of pills, American system, shout out to that. But like, yeah, like it was different. I'm in isolation. I'm alone with myself, and I can only think about what's going on. And I set up this nice plan, and things were coming together, but like life happens. And so, what does that actually mean for me? So again, like it's for me getting in the headspace, I'm not gonna let my circumstances limit me. I'm like, yo, I'm still the best. Whatever, it's rehab, so I get it. And so very much so it was kind of reframing the experience, like this is something else I'm just gonna have to overcome, right? And that's kind of the athlete mindset or the hustler mindset, like in any capacity, right? I mean, you have people coming up from wherever, and anybody that gets out of wherever they are, right, or success, like you're changing your state of being. You're getting out of something that wasn't where you wanted to be, and you're getting into a place that's better. And it takes work, and it takes being uncomfortable. So it was like, yo, I'm really gonna have to do this. No one else is gonna do this for me. I'm literally like, I have to put myself in a spot where I can walk. I have to put myself in a spot where I can jog and run. That's me. That's not anybody else gonna do that. So, I was very diligent, and I was fully committed to all the rehab and everything else like that. But it's like the whole rehab process, like that's mental, right? And that's why I was so much stronger from that, because like your body will heal, but like your mind and your mindset and your attitude really is the most important part. You heal faster if you believe you're gonna heal faster. You're gonna be aching, whatever, if you believe that. You're not gonna walk again if you believe that. Like you really gotta dig. And so like that was that experience. And so it was like cool, like, a lot of pivots and obviously kind of speeding through it, but like even in Simon Fraser. Going out there, and because I'd never been to the West Coast, so I'm like, cool, let's pivot a little bit. Just found out that it was a high-standing academic school when I got out there.
Well, it's American D1.
And it's still American. So it was a good experience. And so it was like, okay, cool, let me come out here. But I redshirted, so I'm competing with first-team offense, like, regularly. When I went left Exeter as a running back, my senior year I played defensive back too. I had my choice, what position I wanted to play on at the different universities that I was speaking with. And so I decided to go defense, decided to play safety, because that's kind of where I was at anyways. DB, corner, kind of like, played all over. But, found after going through that whole year heading into spring camp, getting ready to come in and compete to start myself, my knee was sore, acting up, whatever. And so I found out that I had to get another surgery because the graft didn't heal the first time. Because being in the States, they rehabbed aggressively and had me up in there rehabbing the day after surgery. And I did everything in my power to listen to everything they were saying and do it to a T. So that was a really big reframe and a pivoted game. So I'm like, yo, I did everything to a T. Y'all told me to a T. Got my body back A1, and y'all messed this up, right? And so it was like, that was another piece of like really digging down into the internal piece of like, the ball's in my court and I have to do something about it. And then it was kind of like, had the opportunity to get the surgery. Coming back here, the game plan really was just take a semester off, get the surgery here, and go back out there and, go back to that level. And then having some talks with the coach, he was like, we want y'all here. Like, you're still on track to go pro. Like, this is the coaching, this is the space you need if that's your focus. If that's not your focus, then it's more of a family decision. And so that kind of narrative, had me kind of questioning some more things because of that trade-off again. And the time constraints I was getting to be. I was away from home for like 4 years. Right? My little brother had just been born, and like I'm missing kind of a bunch of those critical pieces, and I lived away. And went through all those things on a solo mission, right? So it was a lot of experience, but then it was like, ended up coming to SMU, Saudi School of Business, first and foremost, the dean, Pat Bradshaw. She was kind of what drew me in because she had a big commitment on community and entrepreneurship and positive impact. So it was like, boom, going into a place where, all of a sudden, not as Simon Fraser, but I can still play football at a high level, still do what I want, have the opportunity to really focus on the business, and I kind of came back quicker on that surgery than I should have per se, but I ended up playing at East West in an all-star game because they didn't reclass me, so I got what ended up being an early invite to the all-star game after playing like 1 year in Canadian safety, which was much different than an American safety because the field's way bigger. As you know.
Yeah, right.
But like a lot of movement, right? And so I mean, like even at every step, like I'm like, okay, well, the game plan was always be the best, but that keeps looking different, and life keeps hitting, and then you have to keep pivoting. And kind of speaking about it now, I can breeze through it, whatever, but that shit's hard as hell. I mean, I had a game plan, and I did everything in my power to control that. Control freak, whatever. I made sure that I did where I needed to be, and I was, and doing the things that needed to be done. And still, stuff doesn't happen the way you want it to happen because that's part of life, right? And so then the game really becomes how quickly can you adjust? How quickly can you bounce back? So for me, that whole experience of the ACL, ingrained the resilience, right? I already had that kind of piece, but I'm like, it's whatever. Something's going to happen, and I'm going to have to actively make a decision to overcome what's going to happen because I'm in a driver's seat. Nobody else can make me walk again. Nobody else can do these things. And so it's like, that's kind of what it comes back to. Like, whatever is an injury, I still was able to play at a higher level after the second time I had to get it done. And not necessarily from all those pieces, right? But it's like, you have to keep pivoting, right? I mean, I ended up walking away from football to focus on building the business because the value and the time wasn't matching up. The opportunity cost was picking up in a way that I wasn't cool and comfortable with and staying at.
And that's when it became a family decision.
Right, and then that's where, leaving the Simon Fraser, even playing SMU, where I'm, still playing at, a high level, whatever the case is, considering going pro, I'm like, I already have this stuff going on, and it's really, my love has become an Achilles heel. And that's not a fun space to be in because I hadn't questioned it too much before. I mean, you grow up loving ball, it's fun, it's enjoyable, then it can, it can start to pay for school and other things, right? But like, it's a tool. And so it's like, the reality is that in sports, especially once you get out of this puberty stuff, and even in the puberty stuff, adults, there's politics and everything, right? And if somebody's posture, somebody wants to make money from you or get whatever. So there's a benefit, right? And so the reality is that what I'm saying in terms of the intentional piece is like, somebody's making money to have you come to their school. Somebody's making money to have you play for them. They're getting paid because of that. And so if they don't value you as a person, if they don't value the squad or whatever the case is, and if you're not tangibly getting something, if you don't walk away a little bit better, not just in football, if you don't walk away with more knowledge, more access, more something, they're winning over you. You're not both winning. And so you end up in a space where, okay, you could spend 2 years at a school and have a great football time, but what else? You ain't doing shit afterwards, right? You don't have the network because you weren't like everybody else in school. Like, athletes don't, like, we get bad branding, you know what I'm saying, because we're supposed to be jocks or, like, whatever, right? You have to bust your ass more. You have less time to study. You have less time to do all these other things, and the expectations on you are higher because you have to maintain a certain GPA. You have to maintain going to practice. You have to maintain going to class. Regular students don't have to do any of that thing. And so it's like, if you're in a space where you're just going through these motions because somebody said that, yo, it's good to have you on the team and you feel good being around the boys and, like, yo, the game plan was go pro. No, you better be the best because at the end of whatever that window is and when it closes, you didn't have the same opportunity, unless it was your focus intentionally. You did not have the same opportunity as anybody else at the university. Right? I've played, in 2 different countries, traveled, different states, especially living on the West Coast. I haven't seen, the cities and the towns and gone out and explored and hung out with people and spent all our time in the city. I was training and doing football. You're traveling on a team with your team, like with the rest of it, with the coaches, with everybody else. Like, you miss out on these experiences. And if you're not intentional with that stuff, what you end up finding out you got out of it is a lot less than what it felt like the whole time. And you can't fall back on a 2-year or 3-year practice. Or you hit playoffs or whatever the case. Like, if you're not stepping out of there with more knowledge about yourself, more ability to understand how to be in a team environment, how to balance and manage your time, and how to be, unbalanced with some things, and how to be uncomfortable, how to, like, if you don't get the core themes out of it, you just had fun, and you paid to have fun, right? And it catches up with you pretty quickly after. You have to graduate at university to take that. Maybe you miss classes, or there are more classes that you need to be in, and you find that out later. Or your journey's longer because, you have 6 years of academics, but you had to do 3 and 3 while you were playing ball, like, whatever it is, right? Like, it's different for everybody, but that's why you have to figure out, like, how to make stuff work for you, because, like, otherwise people will make it work for themselves on your behalf and at your expense, unfortunately. Oh, listen, we're good. Just hop in.
So, you made your choice to come to St. Mary's and to be part of business school here. You'd obviously been working on Infinitus for about 4 years before that, or 5 years before that, but this is when it was really coming to fruition. So what is the point of Infinitus? Why did you create it? And, like, how do people benefit? Because there's some really amazing things that you're doing, and I know people are benefiting, but what is the, like, how did the rollout look like, and what does it look like? Yeah.
It's looking to the outside world a whole lot different, right? I started this like 8.5 years ago, with the vision of, creating a platform that bridges the disconnect between youth and each other, youth in their community, and youth in industry. So, like, that's kind of broad. But, like, the reason really very much so that I'm making a point of that is the emphasis is that, as we spoke about earlier, right? Like, the reality is that nobody has the same foundation, right? The level of support that you get is something that we can control as people go through these transitional periods of change. So whether it's a relationship change, a home change, moving around, going to schools, right? So for me, like, I've had 20 years of education. I've been to 10 different schools. I had to stop, start, restart, make new friends, start new teams, like, all of that, a lot, right? And that's part of life. But the reality is that if you don't have the supports at some of these different periods, right? If you don't understand that, making friends within the first 3 months of going into a space is important to you feeling whole, right? And feeling like you want to stay somewhere. Or, if you're not aware of what it feels like to be triggered and what your response is generally like when you're triggered. You end up doing routines and you end up in these spaces where you're on autopilot and people are not the drivers, action, based in their own life, right? They're not in the driver's seat. And so for me, it was very much like, that's why I started Infinitus. So I'm like, everybody has limitless potential, right? And that's what the mission is, right? Empowering youth, individuals, and communities to embrace their limitless potential. Because everyone has the skills, the unique insight, the gift. Like, it looks different depending on everybody, right? But everyone has these things. And the reality is that the most more often than not, you don't get to celebrate these things or explore these things because your circle has told you it's unrealistic. Or people in your sphere are like, oh, I've never seen that done before, it doesn't make sense. And so if we don't stretch outside of this, if we don't see the bigger picture, if we're not challenged, if we don't get exposure to network or any of these things, we end up missing out. Not because we're making an active choice, but because we're not being supported and we're not learning how we can get, receive, and support ourselves. And so for me, like, that's really what it was, right? People slipped through the cracks the whole way through. And as I've kind of gone into it, like, it shifted, like, people are swept through the cracks. And it starts at the youth, at the youngest stage, and it goes all the way through life, right? Whether it's academically, athletically, professionally, socially, whatever. If your needs are not being met and you don't know how to ask for help and you don't know how to meet those needs strategically, intentionally, whatever it looks like, you're going to miss out. And so for me, it's really a matter of, I'm visual. So a skyscraper, right? The most important part of any building, or the skyscraper specifically, is the foundation. They're going up all kinds of high, right? These are the tallest buildings. And without that foundation, you can't build. You can't keep growing and learning. So as a person, if you don't have that foundation, if your needs aren't being met in certain whatever ways, and you're not even aware of it, sure, it'll work. But when you tear your ACL, or when you have 3 major surgeries, or when you move to 10 different schools, like, eventually these things are going to catch up with you, and you have to deal with what's going on. And if you don't have a foundation at that point, when things are getting rickety and the wind's blowing, right, the table will, things will topple over. And so for me, like, that's at its core what Infinitus is about, right? It's providing that framework and that roadmap to enable people, right, to embrace their limitless potential. And it looks different. So, I've been doing that for the last 8 years. Over the last 5 years, it's already been, we've engaged over 3,000 people, which is sweet because it's, age 6 to being generous, 55 plus, But, it started off 8 years ago, like, dealing with young black boys, grades 3 and 4, talking about role models, mentors, the difference, and why they're important, but to start seeing yourself as a brand. Because you can be the class clown, and I did it. But at the end of the day, it's still your name on that test. It's still you getting a report card. It's still you having to do an interview for the job, or getting in trouble at home when your friend was the person that told you to do it. Doesn't matter, right? And so starting to take that accountability and that responsibility is very important. And for me, it's changing the whole, the mindset and the attitude, because you can't just say, I want you to do better, be better, go ahead and do that. We're talking at people, right? It's actually being in the spaces. So with us and Infinitus, it really is about, shifting that headspace and providing a framework. So, we do obviously events and training and learning. So whether it's, mentoring and facilitation and some consulting work, dealing with youth, whether it's, in elementary all the way through post-secondary and university and things of that nature, or in community groups, or also dealing with government, right, and community organizations and nonprofits as well as private sector. We're definitely touching on a bunch of different pieces. But the pillars and the core of everything we do, right, is focusing on identity, resiliency, leadership, mental health, right, and there's all that overlap, right, and then you throw leadership on top of that because everybody is a leader on their own way. But again, it looks differently.
It looks a lot different.
And so, it's building those abilities, whether it's with youth or on teams or as an entrepreneur or an individual or organizations or governments. Like, it's being able to leverage the value in the room, in the space already, not recreating the wheel, right? Everybody has different degrees of access to the resources that's their network. And it's figuring out how we can leverage what you do have and what you already have been doing to be able to put you in a space to where you can build your portfolio tangibly. Not just having a conversation about, let's build your digital entrepreneurship mindset and your lens. What's important to you? Like, what's your end goal? Are you trying to put your moms in a house? Are you trying to get a car? Are you trying to start a family? Like, what are you trying to do? And so what is your North Star? Because being able to have a North Star, being able to have reason and justification for something changes how you perceive what's going on, right? If you have a reason for something, it's no longer suffering. You're able to get through it because it's a reason, it's with purpose, it's the journey. And so that's really a big, piece of the work that we're doing, whether it's with the media or the consulting or the facilitation in the schools or in the government or coaching. Like, with, the full range is really about, putting people in the driver's seat and enabling them to understand that there are so many tools in this digital space, right, that you have access to, but you need to be intentional and you need to be focused on putting yourself in the driver's seat. Because everybody's North Star, whether you're aware of it or not, there are pieces that pull you. You're pulled toward doing something, this work or having these conversations, or pulled away from these groups. And so it's really just being more curious about those things and having more conversations and getting out of your comfort zone. But what does that look like? So, with Infinitus and the programming and the work, it is about creating these spaces that focuses on experiential learning and focuses on, the peer dynamic, to where we're putting people in positions to feel comfortable and to feel confident. And as they build, whether it's digital literacy or, entrepreneurship or any of these pieces, like, they're comfortable, right? No, people don't want to talk about financial literacy or, how to use your phones and stuff like that, because they feel like they should already know the answers. You should already know how to do that, right? But how do you hold a space for people to be curious and ask questions and grow and challenge?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a great product. It's amazing that you're just trying to do it, because what we've talked about before, some people are doing very well, but there's a lot of people out there that are saying they're doing something and are not. And so it sounds like you're going to really put it to the test for a lot of people on how to, maybe they have to put their own lives in check. Be a little bit more open-minded about things, right? Because that sounds like the biggest part of it is you can do something if you feel you can do it. Mm-hmm. You should feel you can do it. But the way our education systems and things have done it, we're not empowered. That's honestly, when I hear what you're saying, you're basically saying you're empowering people to think that they can do the things that they could have done with it, but they couldn't. They didn't think they could do it. They didn't think they could achieve it.
Right,
and I say that for my whole childhood. Like, the amount of times that I wanted to do something, and people would be like, "That's not possible," and then because I was so active, like, I'd just do it. I'd figure out how it needed to be done, and it was like the amount of times that just kept happening. I just got to a point where I was like, "No, I can do anything. It's just whether I want to do it, and if I don't want to do it, then done. But if I do want to do it, what are the steps to achieve it?" And you can't be insulted along the way. You got to put yourself in those uncomfortable situations, like you said. And I feel like that's what you guys are doing when you're talking to doctors or whatever. Like, yes, you guys are the experts, but you don't hold all the knowledge. So let's get different perspectives and see how this works. Yeah.
Oh, very much so. And what you're saying is, like, that's the key. Like, we get exposed to, or we're told certain things that we need to be doing, or ways that we got to go about stuff through institutional learning or through our family or the heritage or culture or whatever. And it's very difficult, and it's challenging, and it's uncomfortable to ask questions or start to draw boundaries to even friends or family, like, why, right? But the self-care and, these things are needed, because, as you're going about it, like, it's going to look different, right? And understanding that you have the power individually to affect the change in your life that you want to see is very important. But it's also, it's empowering to see and to hear and to have that conversation, but to be in a space with other people experiencing that, right? And having the conversation of, listen, I had to get over some hurdles today, and or even myself, right? I'm not going in as an expert for any of this stuff. I'm going in to have a conversation and be real and take it there. And that means going to be more vulnerable with some of the people in sessions or running programming, like doing stuff in the prison, as an example. I spoke about stuff in the prison with some of the people that I've never met before on a deeper level than some of my close friends. They didn't get, you don't get to see those different sides, but it's being in the moment and being authentic. Like, you do have a reason for being there, right? So maybe it is even as small, like, I can't quit my job today, or I can't do this, but, like, I'm going to make a point of saying some affirmations, some positive affirmations today, and then I'm going to keep going and building up steam, right? Because it looks different, the moves that need to be made for everyone. But, like, it really is about, like, being in the driver's seat, like, simply enough, right? I mean, you can't just, the world is changing, right? And we can't map where we're going based on where we've been or what we've seen, because that's only a small piece of the pie. And if you haven't traveled and you haven't had lots of conversations or got to speak with billionaires, how can you just assume? How do you know what's going on? You don't know what you don't know, so you have to keep searching and finding and asking questions.
If you're not careful, you end up being like Blockbuster, right? You thought you were at the head of the game and everything was going great, and then you just don't exist anymore. And so, yeah, like, yeah,
pretty much so, right? And I think it comes back to that piece of, we talked about this, but like you have to put in the work. If you don't like where you're at, even if you're okay with where you're at, like you have to put in the work. Because Blockbuster, got sloppy. They got impatient, and just like with other people, right? You can't afford that risk of just going to school or just going to something.
So